Okay, there it goes. That brought it back to large size. The Cyber Darlings, Part 2. So Pablo, Pennywise, and Sandra Makepeace, the Cyber Darlings, both thought that things were going great, especially their relationship. That is, until Sandra Makepeace made friends with some of the girls at work, the Twilight Girls, to go out for an occasional after-work cocktail or two, or even the occasional night out of dancing with the girls from work. And if things ran really late, she could always crash at her friend Vivian Vroom's apartment on her couch and then go straight from there to work. This helped out a lot when Sandra Makepeace still lived at home way out in the suburbs. Pablo thought he was responsible because he liked going out with his friends on the occasional weekend instead of spending it with her. He felt bad about it, but he didn't want to give up his friends. Then when Sandra moved out of her family's home and moved in with the Twilight Girls, their time apart became even more frequent. You might even call it a lifestyle change. Every weekend night and then on the weekends, whenever for some reason Pablo couldn't make the drive into the city or Sandra couldn't make it out to the suburbs, while his lifestyle didn't really change, hers was becoming more and more dominated by dancing and moving to the rhythm of the clubs. Pablo didn't like giving her up to her friends on the occasional weekend, but after all, he did the same thing hanging with his own friends down at the Silver Palace or just at some local hangout instead of driving into the city. So what could he say when her weekends home became less and less frequent as well? Still, he didn't like it much when she did it. They both could see that their relationship was facing new challenges, but they thought that it was strong enough to survive the challenges. They both sure hoped so. Since they graduated, their career tracks were taking them in different directions, pulling them further and further apart. He worked with his hands, and she worked with symbols and numbers all day. He could look at a system and figure it out, while she had to figure it all out in her head, manipulating symbols and numbers all day in her head. He was unbelievably impressed at how smart she was. He loved her, but she felt the rhythm of the night calling to her. The weekends she went with the Twilight Girls dancing were always so fun and exciting for her, and when they asked her to move into their apartment with them, she jumped at the chance. Her parents helped her move, even though they worried about her. She was determined, and now she was living the life and loving it, sharing a bedroom with a washer and dryer. When Pablo Pennywise would drive into Metal City each weekend to see her, he could see she was changing. He was losing her, too wild to possess, but still too beautiful and lovely to let go of. Pablo had to admit it even to himself that he loved her. He was crazy about her. In spite of all of his programming and countervailing conditioning to find someone who checked the right boxes to fall in love with a local girl, someone who would be acceptable to his family. He knew they would never accept someone they believed was a party girl. So he was very careful about sharing anything about Sandra's new life in the city with his family, because it didn't matter. He didn't care what they thought because he loved her, and although he didn't have the words to phrase it, somewhere in his cybernetic heart, he really loved her. And as long as there was oil in his veins, he was determined to win her back, somehow, some way, and take her out of Metal City and back to Cybertown in the suburbs, where they would share morning walks and evening talks as they grew old together, away from all the excitement and ballyhoo of the city. So Pablito confronted Sandra and tried to tell her in his less than perfect way how he felt about her, but it came out all wrong, and so they fought as the Twilight Girls jumped to her defense. So he left their apartment and drove home. Then he called her up late at night, early in the morning, when he knew she would be home from the clubs, and this time to his surprise, she told him that she felt the same way, that she loved him, and she was so tired of her new life in the city with the Twilight Girls, working all day and dancing all night like a million other young people in the clubs and dance halls across Metal City. She could already see the pattern to this life, leading to nowhere but loneliness, and wanted to eventually move out of the apartment that she shared with the Twilight Girls and move back to the suburbs. They both expressed an interest into going back to the way things were between them. That was all Pablo Pennywise needed to hear. He hung up the connection and drove straight into Metal City and came for her. But when he got there, even though Sandra Makepeace had packed her things and was waiting for him and went with them willingly, that fact meant nothing to the Twilight Girls, who had witnessed the earlier fight and could not process what was happening. So they reacted to the threat they perceived and attacked Pablo Pennywise, thinking that it was to save Sandra Makepeace. But Vivian accidentally pushed Pablo over the banister at the top of the stairs. She was striking back at her own demons as well as trying to save Pablo. She had enough of men, being brutes. Now Pablo lied in the puddle of his own oil at the bottom of the stairwell. Vivian, who thought she was protecting Sandra, snapped out of it and couldn't believe what she had done and felt awful. She felt responsible. She felt confused. And she tried to process what had just happened. And she looked at Sandra and realized that she had gotten it wrong. So Pablo, his oil leaking out fast, reached out calling to Sandra because he loved her till the end, while Sandra, being held back by her friends, fell to her knees and began to cry. Then they let her go and she ran downstairs to Pablo. Just then, a cyber angel floated down from the sky, and time seemed to stand still, as if everyone was suddenly frozen in place. And then with a touch of the cyber angel's wand, Pablo was restored to health and vigor. And as his eyes opened up and he saw Sandra holding him in her arms, he said her name out loud. Sandra, Sandra, I love you. As time once again began to move, and the two young lovers kissed, and the cyber angel knew how this story would end. Sandra, believing that she had almost lost her one true chance at love, was so done with the fast lane and with the Twilight Girls and missing Pablo all the time, being so far away from him. She ran back up to the top of the stairs and got her things, and this time no one acted to stop them from leaving. As they drove away, Sandra asked him, "How is it possible you're not dead?" "I don't know," he said, as they looked up at the heavens, and the cyborg darlings drove off into the night, never to frequent their old nighttime haunts in Metal City again, choosing instead to spend the rest of their lives enjoying morning walks and evening talks as they grew old together, raising a family of 5 and living well into their 90s before leaving this world within weeks of each other. Watching them drive away, Vivian said, "He came back for her, just like in the movies." "Yeah," said Trixie. The three girls sighed as they all reflected on for a moment on what had just happened. And then Susie Heartbreaker said, "Well, we'll have to find a new roommate." "Well, one of you needs to find the next one," said Vivian Vroom. Trixie Troublemaker and Susie Heartbreaker both nodded, giving each other a glance as if that would happen. Of course it would be Vivian who found the next roommate, because people like her. They trust her, and she knew how to talk to people. And as the Twilight Girls headed out for a night of dancing, Susie Heartbreaker said, "Living on my own, it hasn't been as easy as I thought it would be." "No," said Vivian Vroom. "It takes a lot of work." And then Trixie added, "But definitely worth it." And she said with a grin, as they all nodded in agreement, "Oh yeah, most definitely." Do 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 do.